Theater, everyone. My name is Nick Noel, and I am just one of your hosts.
And I am the other host, Ron Stratton. Hello.
And today on Pixel Theater, we're going to be talking about Silent Hill 2 Revelation.
Where is my father?
The darkness is coming. It's safer to be inside. Run.
A movie.
Where are we?
So well plotted that it takes them a full 40 minutes to actually reveal Silent Hill. So that's fun. This movie was directed by M.J. Bassett, who's done actually a movie I liked but I don't think was well received, called Solomon Kane, which is about some immortal I want to say he's like a preacher or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, I like Solomon Kane.
It was some sort of weird 16th century superhero or something. It was very strange.
It was the guy who wrote Conan came up with him, right?
Mm-hmm. I think it was Arthur Conan Doyle, or no?
Yeah.
No, that was
no.
It's I always get those guys' names confused.
I know it's hard. Yeah, dang it.
Oh well, we'll look it up later.
Yeah.
And this movie actually made its money back, which was surprising because I literally didn't know it existed. So it made like 56 on a $20 million budget. So actually vastly slashed the budget.
Well, so this was 2012, right?
Yeah.
This was definitely, and you can tell now, riding that wave of like new age 3D spurred on by Avatar. It was all shot in 3D. So it was definitely pushing the whoa effects to very poor quality. I would have liked to have seen it in 3D. I'm sure it wasn't great, but that was the angle for this sequel.
I see.
And it probably sold well, the box office tickets are probably marked up. You're probably paying $20 a ticket, so therefore bigger box office gross. Because that was the big driving force to see this in the theater. Probably was the 3D.
And some might say the only driving force.
Not a good movie, sir. Not a good movie at all. It's funny because I initially tried to watch this soon after it came out, and I hated it. I think I shut it off after 10 minutes. So, actually giving it a chance this time, it's really bad, but it's not awful. It's like we have
gained some perspective.
We've gained some perspective in our time, and it's the best Uwe Boll could ever hope to accomplish. You know what I mean? If you had told me that he had created this, where'd you go? Yeah, it would be his masterpiece, honestly, because it goes back to the adage that we've revisited a few times on this show, and it's what makes a good video game adaptation? This was not a good film, but if we were to break it down and do an autopsy on it, is it a good video game adaptation? And for that, it does a very good job of bringing Silent Hill 3, the game, to life. The casting for the lead girl looks exactly thematically, it looks and feels like that game in a way that's more genuine than the original Silent Hill movie. And again, I think we talked about, giving the director kudos on the last one, but there is an almost, I don't want to say insincerity, but it's playing the music because the game had the music. It's doing this because the game did this. And this one does that in a little more natural fashion. I think it's a better directed movie, but everything goes wrong. But the direction is good, and the art direction is almost there, but you can tell they had less money to work with because it looks really bad. I was reminded of the Hellraiser straight-to-video sequels that were coming out. It's in that vein almost, even though I saw a thing that was bragging about except for the weird CG spider baby thing, everything is practical effects. But, Pyramid Head, his makeup went from 3 hours down to 40 minutes. And it's you can tell, you can tell that this is cheaper. There
was that. It was also sillier. It felt sillier.
It felt very silly.
Kit Harington's in it, and he just looks like a dork the whole time.
Boy, Kit Harington's film debut somehow still not as embarrassing as the final season of Game of Thrones.
I thought it was interesting that he was in it, and also Sean Bean's in it since they were together. I guess this must have filmed right before Game of Thrones, or right after? It must be right before, because I can't imagine
it's interesting because that pilot alone of Game of Thrones is interesting. And like somebody would break this down for us better than me just kind of remembering a 10-year-old article. But they basically filmed chunks of that pilot like a year at one point, and then they went, oh God, and they did reshoots a year later. And then so they probably filmed, 2009, 2010, took a break and then really started the show for serious. And they probably could have filmed this in the meantime. Or even done it.
I mean,
he looks so young. I don't think he did this after season 1. This looks right before Game of Thrones really got going. But interesting. Again, and no one really had anything to work with. The scripts were so bad in a exposition dump that didn't know what to do. It didn't know how to be purely based on the games and also retcon, but being forced to follow up the original movie. Like, it's strange. It felt slavishly devoted to following up loose threads from the movie, but then it just like rewrote the movie anyway. Like, it didn't care. There's all these weird little things that they just decided to change. Like, are there 2 cults? No, there's just the one cult, but it's
the same
now.
Cult. I had thought that cult had been killed.
Yeah, the cult was wiped out.
I guess
but
they're still hanging out. There is some I'm trying to center my brain because the movie, it was like just info dump after info dump. So that's like the problems I had with Silent Hill 1, the first one, and also this one is it's less about like dialogue or anything. It's just about flitting to one scene where some character gives you like a huge amount of information and then going to another one and then hearing
and characters know things they have no way of knowing. Like the PI knows that her dad lied to her about, like, how did the PI know any of that stuff? Like, that was weird. Malcolm McDowell's character knows things about like Kit Harington being like everyone's like read the screenplay and that's their exposition dump, and it's just really odd that they know the things they know. Carrie Ann Moss isn't really introduced. That was weird. Like, she just kind of strolls on as the villain. I have no eyebrows, and like I look like I'm from Hellboy 2. And for what little she had, I mean, she's great, so she did a good job.
I don't know. I did kind of think like she was delivering the lines as they were written, obviously. But I did kind of feel like she was like waiting for better dialogue to show up. They were like, well, this is just the test stuff, right? Like,
this is a screen test for my makeup.
We're gonna get it when it makes like actual sense. Like when like anything that I'm saying has any basis in anything we've talked about before. So it was also like just so like telegraphed. It felt like as soon as Kit Harington showed up, and I was like, well, that guy's from Silent Hill. I mean, he's obviously from Silent Hill. Yeah. Why wouldn't he be? Like, of course that's what's happening. And then, the big reveal. So it's like not shocking at all. Did you like anything about this movie?
I don't know if we talked about it on the last one, but the best quote unquote Silent Hill movie to date right now is Jacob's Ladder. Like, if that is a Silent Hill movie. Like, that is such an enormously well done, incredibly creepy, like all the practical effects are in camera movie. And I feel like the director was a fan, because there's and I'm not saying that there's anything in this that comes close to that. I'm just saying that there's an atmosphere in this that I can tell the director tried to be Jacob's Ladder. They failed, but but I did appreciate that attempt, I guess. Like, that was there.
Can you remind me what Jacob's Ladder is?
So Jacob's Ladder is a 1980s horror film about a Vietnam vet who starts having these horrible nightmares. Like, he just starts seeing insane stuff, and he doesn't know if he's going crazy or if he's in hell or what's going on, and it just amplifies from there. And really, really, really good movie. I recommend it to everyone, especially this October. Like, that is the go-to Halloween movie for me.
We should I should check that. I've always heard about Jacob's Ladder as a movie, but I've never understood.
Oh, give it a watch, man. It's good.
I may have somehow confused it with some Robin Williams movie. I think I confused Jacob's Ladder with Jacob the Liar or something.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say that or the Fisher King. I could see that on memory, sure.
So anyway, I guess I've always assumed Jacob's Ladder was some strange Holocaust movie, but I guess it isn't.
Nope, it's very different.
Good
to say any more would spoil it, though. So give it a watch. Go on blind. It's really cool. Silent Hill 2 was influenced by Jacob's Ladder. The director of the games was a huge fan of that movie, so they kind of complement each other that way. And that's the thing. Like Silent Hill, the series kind of peaked for me at the second one. Like 3 is okay, but like I followed the series after that based solely on the music and the composer and everything he did. Like the music is what I followed, and the games are like okay. So Silent Hill 3 was a game I never really held my interest, but it was nice to see all the touches on this.
Is this like the Silent Hill game, like 3 game, or
pretty much? I mean, and they
felt like they were taking some stuff from like 1 and kind of also forcing in, because Silent Hill 2 was not like the actual Silent Hill.
It's not very elegant, but that's how they did the name changes on this. Okay. Like, oh, you're Harry Mason now because it's Harry Mason. It's 10 years later in Silent Hill 3, and the little girl from Silent Hill 1 is who you play as. And, you know, so all that stuff is pretty faithful to the games.
You know, I thought it was interesting, like, because I had thought they were maybe doing like a reverse of the first one, where you have Harry going and trying to find his daughter, and instead it's his daughter trying to find him. But I guess that's just the third one. I should have researched it more. It's weird that I guess they just, in terms of like the lore of the game, the first Silent Hill movie is kind of just a smashed together 1 and 2,
it's a remix.
Sort of.
It's like I like that's the thing, and why I do appreciate this one. Again, it's not a good movie, but I appreciate that its attempt that it was like there's other Silent Hills. Silent Hill's different for everyone, because that is the purity of the games that the first movie got wrong, trying to make it all the nightmare of this demon girl, which this movie still does anyway. But Silent Hill 1 was just the greatest hits. I like this. I like Pyramid Head. I like that. Like, we're going to mash them together, even though they are all from different things. And this one tries to do more of a direct adaptation of 3 while also being a follow-up to the first movie, and then changing things that just arbitrarily didn't like in the first movie anyway. It would have been nice to just been more of a reboot or something. And again, it goes against what the third game was, but that would have been a nice compliment to the first movie, having it be Sean Bean as the lead, and you're following Harry Mason like the first game. You know, like that would have been nice.
Maybe, do you think they just couldn't get Sean Bean for that long? Like, couldn't afford him?
It's like, no, I'm not leaving this apartment. You got me for 3 days, and I'll walk on a soundstage, and that's it. I want $800,000.
So I also wanted to comment on this. So like, in Silent Hill, so Alessa's still there. She's still terrorizing people, I guess.
That was the end of the first one, is them joining together, and it's now like Alessa going back. But they were like, oh, no, that didn't happen. Alessa's still there.
Like, so that was kind of strange.
Yeah, but that's weird.
But I do think it's interesting that like their version of like older Alessa just kind of looks like the lead singer of a not very good like goth punk band or something.
Yeah.
Like Avril Lavigne, but like slightly darker.
Yeah.
I'm like blanking on like this movie. This movie felt like such a nothing experience, kind of like the first one, where you know, there's all these like showing like, oh, here are the nurses again, but they're slightly creepy. What did you think about though the first half, let's say, where Silent Hill is kind of invading her reality, and like, so all these like monsters come up while she's,
because I wish it's been so long since I played the game, but that's how the game starts too. You spend a large chunk of it outside of Silent Hill. Like, you fall asleep in a mall and you wake up in the mall is like on the other side now, you know? So there's little creepy things like that. Maybe it's spent too much time there. Like, maybe they could have got to that quicker. Because the cop character is saying she's a murder suspect, then they'll just drop. Like, they never follow up with those guys.
I didn't even realize that the cops never come back.
No, that whole plot thread is just abandoned. So leave all that out. You know, that's not important.
Or maybe there is an end part where there's a whole caravan of police officers heading towards Silent Hill.
So the end.
Is that the cops, or what is that?
I thought that watching this, but no. See, what that is just a complete like sequel dump bullshit Marvel Universe thing. Because the guy they climb into the semi truck with, he's the lead character in the PSP Silent Hill, and he's driving a truck, and he ends up in Silent Hill. And then as they pass the prison truck the prison bus is from Silent Hill Homecoming. No, I think it's Homecoming, but it's another Silent Hill game, I think the 6th or 7th one, where a prison bus gets stuck in the rain and ends up like stranded in Silent Hill and a prisoner gets out. So they're alluding to, here's possible sequels we could do, but then it didn't do well enough to do sequels, so that was abandoned. But that's all those were. So the cops are just not followed through. It felt like they were trying
to do something, but apparently not. Okay.
I will say it was clever. I love the panning of like the leaving Silent Hill to you're now entering Silent Hill, and it was all misty. Like that was cool. It's the little things at that point that I was. I'm just saying, I'm giving it like half a thumbs up for that. I thought that was a nice touch.
So we've kind of talked a little bit about the writing, and it's like you were mentioning, because this isn't the original writer. The original writer seemed to actually care about Silent Hill. Like
the original writer, Roger Avery. Is that what I said?
Richard or Roger Avery?
Richard Avery, yeah. So you could tell he played the game, or at least knew the game well enough to do like a remix of it. And sadly, after that movie came out, he was involved. I'm sorry.
You were right. It's Roger Avery.
Okay. He was involved in a DUI that got someone killed, and he ended up in jail for a year. But I'd read interviews about how he was working on the sequel screenplay while doing his time, and I always thought like how horrible that situation was. But man, that might give him a dark angle on doing the sequel if you're going to look at any good from a situation like that. But he wasn't asked to come back. Like whatever happened, his version was not used, and instead this director ended up writing and producing it herself, and who's gone on to apologize for the film. And I think there's a blog post talking about this basically disowning it and doesn't want anything to do with the Silent Hill movies, which is sad because again, I don't look at this and see bad direction. I see a bad screenplay, which is their fault. The performances are actually,
and then also like what we were talking about, like just for a very effects heavy movie, they did not give them any kind of budget to actually do that.
I think most of the money was spent on that opening sequence. I remember reading like that whole flame circle at the beginning of it. Like that was it. That's where the money went, and the rest was like, ooh, let's try to pull this together. Yeah.
So the only other thing I wanted to mention before maybe going into other aspects of the film, what did you think of the performances overall? Like,
well, because the lead girl does a decent job. Yeah. Sean Bean's getting his paycheck. Carrie-Anne Moss was great. She did what she could with what she was given. The character was, and Malcolm McDowell too. He's always going to chew the scenery like no one else. So he did a good job with that.
It was fun when he showed up for his one paycheck scene, and then never talked to or heard from him ever again.
No,
and I have no idea what was like. He shoved a disc in his chest or something.
Yeah,
I
wasn't even going to bring it up. that was,
and also, but also discs turn you into monsters too, because that's what happens to Carrie-Anne Moss.
Yeah, because he's revealed as Carrie-Anne Moss, and he turned into like some ghoul too. So
did he? Okay,
yeah,
I didn't
like that was
even
his
realize
pure self.
That.
Yeah, so weird.
Also,
but
there's apparently something we're supposed to understand that the Pyramid Head guy is going to fight her for some reason. Like, why did that happen?
That was kind of interesting because there's a whole like Silent Hill 2 Pyramid Head's looked at as a villain, but some would argue he always shows up to kind of help Harry on it, or no, the protagonist of Silent Hill 2, he always goes to help him on his way. Like, yeah, he shows up as a threat, but he always ends up leading to another puzzle or doing, so there's this whole argument that, he's kind of ambivalent. Like, he may not be evil, he might be there to help. And so that kind of angle is played up for this, where, he ends up helping Cheryl. What the hell's her name in this? Heather ends up helping Heather.
There's so many people who are introduced very quickly, and then also so many people who have multiple different names, and then we're getting confused from the Silent Hill names, like in the video game. So it's
too much.
It's very difficult to keep track of. I don't understand the ending at all. I don't understand why any of that happened or what we're supposed to do.
Well, because it's weird because Alessa should not be able to enter that circle, but she joins with Heather, which you think her personality would override Heather and she'd be the dominant personality, but they just ignore, so Alessa's just gone now. She's just absorbed. And but she has none of her psychic powers. She doesn't do anything with it. She just wanders into the last encounter like, hey, like she doesn't have a plan. All of that's really weird. Real quick to touch up on performances though, for some reason, because who played Rose in the first one?
Rhoda something.
Yeah, I like her a lot, but her performance was grating to me in the first movie.
Mitchell.
Rhoda Mitchell. Yeah, I like her. I do like her, but that was an execution in the first one where it was like, I have to go. I have to kidnap you. My husband disconnected my debit cards for no reason. Like, all of that was so cringy to me. Like, starting Silent Hill was always kind of uneasy. Yeah. Nothing ever was that bad in this one, even though they also were not great. So,
I don't know. Like, I don't even know where I was going to go with that, Ron. I just like this movie. It didn't destroy me. It's just with these last two of just like, why did anybody make these? Like,
that's the thing. We've gained that perspective now, and there's nothing cynical about the approach of making this. It wasn't necessarily a cash grab, even though, I mean, I guess it was. It just failed. It just came short of attaining what it needed to do. And I'll have thoughts on that more when we talk about what we would do to make it better. But it just missed the mark, like.
I also think that that first scene where they're in like the flaming carousel, nightmare carousel, was silly. It just looked silly, and I don't think
you start the movie off silly. Yeah. And what the problem was is I was into it until the second close up of like the guy he's just like, like right away killed the mood, and I was like, oh, this is a silly movie we're watching. Okay.
It felt almost like we were like watching Beetlejuice or something. Like, just how weird it was. Okay, so let's do, I guess, ratings, and then we'll talk about anything else.
Creepy, unnecessary, bloody teddy bears, or more Pyramid Head.
So what would you out of 10 bloody teddy bears? What would you give this?
I'd give it 3. 3, but I feel like that's kind of harsh. But it's like, just as a film, it wasn't entertaining. It was convoluted for no reason. Performances missed the mark. Everything was exposition dumps that people wouldn't actually talk like how they talk. But I got to give it, if I was going to award it points on faithfulness to the game and an adaptation of the game, it's almost a 7. Like, just aesthetically, it hits a lot of marks that the game hit. And I like, if it had been a better directed movie with a better screenplay, it would have been a great Silent Hill 3 adaptation. But everything
that doesn't make
mark.
me. You're saying this was very faithful doesn't make me want to play that game at all.
Well, it's not a good. Yeah, it's. I mean, people love it, but I'm not a huge fan of that entry. Like it did more like combat based stuff. And it wasn't teddy bears. I'm sorry, it was like pink bunnies, aren't they? But like all of that was heavy.
The fact that we couldn't remember is telling.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think I'd give it a. I don't know. But weirdly, 3 seems too high. But 2 seems too low. So I'm gonna stick with 3. I'll agree with you.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's not even like, there isn't anything where you're watching like Uwe Boll or something where you're like,
no,
well, people don't
no
care.
Point was I
they're not
mad
trying.
Watching it. It was just like, oh, this is not hitting. It's not doing what it wanted to do.
It is supposed to be so horrific and traumatizing.
Yeah.
For that to not really come across and for it to be mainly boring is, or just
it's such a pedigree. They need to give up on the live action and if we're gonna fix this, I would say just moving forward, Silent Hill needs to be like that Love, Death, and Robots on Netflix or like the Animatrix.
Yeah.
Like, give me 10 really creative directors and do animated little vignettes based in the universe, because man, it's a rich universe, dude. Like, they could do some really cool short terrifying movies, and that's all I want. Like, they're just not, they're stumbling when they try to adapt these hour and a half attempts at adapting the movies.
Yeah, for something that is so like, what we've talked about, like with these kind of video game adaptations, like, it's so hard to do because of how much of the experience comes from you making decisions, and how much like that affects your
the games are only scary because you're in the dark playing it, and it's got time to build up to that. When you're just watching an actor stumble through exposition, you're not grounded in that very effectively.
So I do like the idea of making it more like shorter, more targeted, having more people in it, like making it more like kind of like a Twilight Zone, but like a horror Twilight Zone
Yeah.
or something like that, where it's, just this world you're playing with or concepts. If you were gonna do it that way, and then you could maybe have like a small narrative thread that kind of retold this story, because it's not
Mhm.
a it's a convoluted story, but it doesn't need to be
It
necessarily.
doesn't need to be at all. Yeah. There's a
It
lot
can just be, cult takes over a town, sacrifices a girl, it like gains magic powers during it or had them, kills everybody and takes over the town and turns it into like a torture chamber.
Boom.
So like that's
shoot
kind
it in
of
3D, print money.
Yeah. Yeah. I even think it would be. I'm trying to think, like, if you were gonna remake this movie, I think get rid of the Kit Harington character. I don't think that's necessary.
No, lose them.
That whole like Kit Harington, Malcolm McDowell, like I'd try and have it be also like not such a retread of the first one where it's like, oh, and here's another lady in charge of the cult who's trying to kill this girl. Like instead make it like her deciding whether or not to save them at this point, because they've just been tortured for almost 2 decades at this point. Like almost everybody's dead, and Alessa just keeps like putting them in misery, and arguably deservedly so. So it's more like that character Heather, or is it Rose, or is that her mom's name?
Rose is the mom's name.
Rose is the mom. Okay. Well, that character Heather in this movie deciding like I'm going to like heal Alyssa, and we're gonna finally set this town free, and like kind of wrap it up.
Yeah.
And I know these types of movies are so loath to wrap anything up, because it's just like, yeah, but what if there's a sequel? And it's just like, well, you can figure something out when that happens. Make a good movie first.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Are the Silent Hill films or the games ever uplifting in any way at the end, or is it always just
there's
constant
those goofy
misery?
endings, like Silent Hill 2 is so dour and upsetting and tragic, but then you can unlock the ending where the whole time everything was being controlled by a dog. Like this weird stuff like that. But no, they're all pretty like bummer filled episodes.
Well, maybe
Konami didn't know what to do. Konami as a company has just derailed itself, so they're, we were going to get what became Death Stranding was going to be a new Silent Hill. Like everyone was so excited about that, because there was this game called PT, and it was like this weird tech demo looking thing, and the more you played it, the more creepy and terrifying it got. And then the reveal at the end was Silent Hills, and it was going to star Norman Reedus, and it was Hideo Kojima who did Metal Gear Solid, and Guillermo del Toro was going to assist with characters and story. Like it was going to be this incredible marriage of talent, and Konami just thought Hideo Kojima was getting too big for his britches. I don't know. The whole thing is really sordid, but Hideo ended up leaving the company, and he took all those guys with him, and then that became Death Stranding eventually, which is a bummer, because Death Stranding is interesting and cool, but I would have loved to have seen their Silent Hill. That would have been incredible, because they just kept making, like, it became an American developer with none of the intrigue, and it just became a standard, survival horror game. I think games like oh God, why am I blanking on it? The space game.
Dead Space?
Dead Space. Yeah. The first Dead Space is creepier than the last 5 Silent Hills. That's a really good survival horror game. Resident Evil 7 was a return to form and more like what a Silent Hill should be, but until Konami stops making money off of Pinko machines or the gambling stuff, whatever the hell they're doing right now, who knows when we'll see Silent Hill come back to being what it used to be.
It's
It'd
really
be great
interesting.
in VR.
No, thank you. I can't see it anyway, so thank God. But
yeah, that's true.
I can't handle. God, what was it? Like, do you remember? I think I've talked about this one. The only survival horror game I've ever even attempted was Fatal Frame. Can't handle it. No thanks.
Do you remember Clock Tower? We may have talked about this too. But Clock Tower was an interesting one. I think you were a bunch of kids in a clock tower. And the villain had these like giant scissors that would chase you around. It was really
it
creepy,
sounds horrifying.
Yeah, it was cool. I liked it.
But that's interesting that Death Stranding started this way. That's I know I don't come across as the biggest gamer, and I probably am not, I guess, the biggest, but I do like them. But basically, like I've heard a lot about Death Stranding, and it sounds insane. Like I can't imagine like what is even happening. Like somebody tried to explain like how the movement even works in it, and it's like the most convoluted way of walking around that
it's
like
nuts.
Somehow you're like always off balance or something. I don't get it.
I'm just such a huge fan of Kojima. Like I just want to see what he does, and the man's completely insane. Like his creative, he's so creative, and his imagination is so great. Like I'm just like, yeah, all right. I'm just glad he's independently in charge of doing wacky shit like that now. Yeah, Death Stranding is very weird. I did enjoy my time with it though. Like it's one of those things where it's so immersive, and when you're playing it, you really feel connected to that world that you just kind of accept some of the wacky stuff, and it's all right because you can build tracks and all these things that help you carry these boxes, and it was creepily prescient, you know, because you're playing this game where everything's gone to hell, and boy, you got to get your packages delivered to people, and then 2020 happens, you know. But people were able to do really weird stuff, like make their own like roller coasters and all kinds of weird stuff, like in the world in that game. It was very odd. Well, but it's fun.
Yeah, that's interesting. It is. I do appreciate like weird things, you know. So maybe I should
like
give it a
his
shot
weird.
One of these days.
You should. I think you might. I don't know if you'll like it, but you'll appreciate it. I think on some level. But just his take on Silent Hill would have been batshit, and I would have loved to have seen it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's gonna, I guess, wrap up our conversation around Silent Hill. A very strange premise, and then executed just slightly wrong.
If you watch a couple dozen bad video game movies in a row,
you will appreciate Silent Hill after. I don't know. Alone in the Dark is kind of my go-to.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of the worst of the worst, I think.
But I really was gearing up.
I'm sorry.
For this.
Double Dragon. That's worse.
Double Dragon is really bad. But I was gearing up for this, like, oh boy, this is going to be bad, and it wasn't as bad as I remembered. Yeah. But I can't remember. I think it was Rhoda Mitchell coming up in the mirror and going, "I have a talisman. You've got to insert this too and go to the." Like that's where I turned it off the last time. I was like, "No."
That's the beginning, Ron.
I know. That's as far as I made it. So I didn't even know Carrie-Anne Moss was in this. So rewatching it, I was like, "Oh, okay. All right."
The technical difficulties production.